Boom, we are back. It's been a little while. Actually, I guess it's only been a week, but it feels like it's been longer. Ravens won last Thursday night, but more importantly, they traded for Roquan Smith today. And here to join me is Ben Dackiw, Russell Street Report's own fashionista. Ben, before we get into the pile, why don't you give us a quick tour of what you're wearing today?
Well, I got the Ravens Letterman jacket. There's a big old Raven bird on the back. I got the blackout Raven hat. I got my aviators on because I got the sunglasses on, Nikhil, because the future is just too bright. It's too bright in Baltimore. I got to wear these shades. Even in Norman, it's so bright in Baltimore. It's bright in Norman. It's too bright. It's too
So
bright.
I take it you're excited to have Roquan Smith.
Oh, I love it. I mean, two-time All-Pro linebacker, leader in tackles for a second and a fifth, and whoever AJ Klein is, what's not to love? I love it.
Yeah, I don't really think anyone's complaining about landing Roquan Smith. I mean, my first reaction, and this is my first reaction, not my second reaction. My first reaction was we have Roquan Smith on this defense now. Right after that awesome performance against the Bucs, this defense seems like it's hitting its stride and just added an all-pro linebacker. They also are adding back Tyus Bowser and David Ojabo to the roster, and it just feels like this defense is really coalescing at uh, mid-season, and they're ready to just be really tight as a unit for the rest of the year. Smith is a beast. It's going to let Patrick Queen play more will. It's going to get. I mean, he'll be on the field passing downs. They can play a lot more nickel and dime now with Smith out there to him and Queen in nickel to defend against the run. And the pass is a little sharper. So you're just really excited about how this defense looks. It's another little chess piece from Mike Macdonald, who I think is doing a really great job with what he already has. So there's just so much to love. And like you said, the compensation with the Bears eating all but basically the bare minimum of his salary. That's how they got a second and a fifth out of the Ravens. Otherwise, I would have been surprised if we gave up a second and a fifth for Smith. Maybe that's how fifth and the Klein got in the deal. I don't know. But, we'll talk about kind of the long-term impacts of this later in the show. But the short-term impacts is that the Ravens already arguably had a top 5 defense, probably inarguably had a 10 top defense. And it's pretty inarguable now that they're in the top 5 squarely with a linebacker core. I just saw tweeted out. I'm going to see if I can find it again. Patrick Queen, Roquan Smith, Odafe, David Ojabo. Kyle Hamilton is a linebacker, but he still kind of counts in terms of that underneath middle of the field defense, all under 25 years old or 25 and under. And that's just a fantastic looking defense for the rest of this year.
I'm not quite ready to give them the top 10 label just yet. Where if they come in and they smoke the Saints on Monday Night Football next week, then maybe we can have that conversation. But they're a bit too lenient with leads for my liking still. So I can't give them the top 10 quite yet, but they are definitely improving. I was a big defender of Mike Macdonald when this team was blowing leads and losing games. I always thought just give him a few weeks, let his guys get comfortable, let Chuck call his defense, just stay the course, everything's going to be fine. And I always said the worst pass defense in the NFL, it was always an inflated number. No one had more balls thrown against them than the Ravens the first month and a half of the season. It was always an inflated stat. They were never the worst pass defense in the league. If Marlon Humphrey doesn't get hurt against Miami, we're not having a conversation anywhere close to this.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I even heard people saying fire McDonald as recently as the Browns game, I think. So I don't know. I don't think there's I think one thing is that there's the expectations and the historical goal that this franchise has set just means expectations are high, and people being on McDonald 3 weeks in, I wasn't even listening to it, and I'm still not really listening to it because this defense is playing really well. They're gelling. And he's a first-year defensive coordinator. Like, I don't know. I'm not expecting him to be a guy, as good as a guy who's been in this league for several years and is super comfortable with everything. There are going to be growing pains, and this is a long-term investment in the defense. And that's it to me. And I think giving him another good piece like this is going to help him for the rest of the season. It gives him the main thing it gives him is it just gives him options and it gives him depth. This team is concerned about their injuries. They've had their injury issues. Now they have linebacker depth. Now they have multiple guys who they feel comfortable covering the middle of the field in nickel and dime defenses who can still step up against the run. They have multiple middle linebackers who can blitz really well. They still just have so much they can do, and it's just really exciting.
I think with McDonald, now that he is going to get Roquan Smith, and Adam Schefter did just tweet that he is going to probably play on Monday night. I don't know how much he's going to play against the Saints. I guess we'll wait and see. But the bye week is very good timing for him to get acclimated with McDonald's system. But Mike McDonald now has one of the biggest collections of talent of defensive players of any defensive coordinator in the National Football League. I believe in him, but this defense needs to start playing like a top 5 unit with all the names they have. There's no reason this defense can't be top 5.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've seen that in stretches of games, just like you've seen the offense do that in stretches of games. And, part of it is Mike Evans is one of, in my opinion, the most underrated receivers of all time. And you saw that against the Tampa Bay Bucs. And that's how the Bucs got most of their yards downfield, was Mike Evans winning 50-50 balls, which for Mike Evans are really 75-25. And, I felt like they played really well against the Browns. Losing Michael Pierce and then not is actually a big loss for the run defense. Something they're still adjusting to a little bit. Roquan helps with that too. And I think part of the thing is they're just betting on the development of the defense to just come together and gel as the year goes on. And I don't know. I haven't really been worried about the defense at all this year. I'm still not worried about the defense. I think they, looked really good against Tampa Bay. That second half, they kept the Ravens in the game in the first half, and Tampa Bay threw its best punches in the second half, and the Ravens, what they did is something that they've actually struggled to do a little bit so far this season, which is bend but don't break in the red zone. I know they allowed scores on the Bucs' last 3 drives, all of which were, at least 8 plays and 60 yards, but they weren't really long drives. All of those plays had a couple big, 1 or 2 big chunk plays that earned most of those yards, and pretty much every time they were to Mike Evans. And so I feel really good about this defense. About the offense, I'm a little more concerned, partially just because we're getting into that scary area with injuries again. Bateman's out for a few weeks. Gus Edwards is out short term. That to me is where I'm a little more concerned. It's really nice to have Bowser and Ojabo back and ready to contribute. I think Bowser plays Monday night. I think Ojabo plays after the bye. But I don't know. Roquan Smith makes this defense even more solid than it was before, and the offense still has all the same questions, I think, if not more after today.
Now, if the defense should come in, and they should absolutely dominate the Saints, I'm not worried about the defense heading into the Superdome. Isn't it? No, it's in Baltimore, right?
No, it's in the Superdome. It's in the Superdome.
It is in the Superdome. Okay, so the Superdome is a tough place to play.
I mean, I hope it's in the Superdome. I'm going down there for the game, so if it's not there, then that's it's going to be kind of an issue.
Moving on. The Superdome is a tough place to play. So, but the Saints are starting Andy Dalton, 80% of Jameis Winston. I mean, I'm not scared of the Saints for the Ravens defense, but for the offense, the young receivers are finally coming alive, which is something the Ravens bet on heading into the season. Deshaun Jackson will probably be active in New Orleans on Monday night, but I don't know how much stock the Ravens should put into their young receivers coming alive against Tampa. Isaiah Likely, not really so much him, because he's a walking mismatch against basically any team they should play. But for the wide receivers, the Buccaneers had 4 cornerbacks out against the Ravens. So they're up against the B team. So I'm not sure how much the Ravens should put into that. I would still like to see them do something at the wide receiver position.
Yeah, I mean, we still have another day for the trade deadline, and the fact that we only took on, I think, $575,000 of what's remaining on Roquan's salary.
Very big deal.
I don't think it's that. I mean, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think it's what explains how they got AJ Klein in that 5th rounder in the deal. I don't think it explains so much because the Ravens still like to keep a little cap cushion as much as they can for anything else that may pop up beyond just another move. It leaves them enough flexibility to go after another move, but I'm not necessarily expecting one the way I was expecting one like this before today. Now that they've got their one, I'm like, okay, they're still they still may bargain hunt, they still may look, but I'm not really banking on anything. You talk about. I think we can move into our recap of the Bucs game now. Now that we're talking about it a little bit more, and I think we can start off with Raven of the game. We mentioned Isaiah Likely, and I don't think this really can go to anyone else. Because he stepped up not just in terms of how he played, but stepping into Mark Andrews' role is a lot more than just Isaiah Likely stepped up. We were kind of expecting to see him step up already this season with the attention paid to Andrews, and we just didn't really see it yet. And then when Andrews went down, Likely stepped into his role, and Jackson was hitting him. Now, Likely had a great game. He had several good catches. He's really good at finding soft spots in zone coverage. The other guy I want to mention here is Justin Houston, who had 2 sacks on just 16 snaps, and just again, I think is a Hall of Fame edge rusher. I just don't think he gets his due either. Who'd you have as your Raven of the game?
I gotta give it to Isaiah Likely. He and J.K. Dobbins had a very frustrating start to the season in terms of snap count. Maybe Dobbins, maybe more so, but Likely's usage just kept inching down and down and down. But last week against the Buccaneers, I thought I had this pulled up. Apparently, I did not. Last week against the Bucs, he played 67% of the snaps. And against the Browns, he played 11%. So Mark Andrews being out makes a big difference. But not only he had a problem with drops at the beginning of the year. I didn't see any drops. He looked great. He looks great after the catch, but if he's going to stay at the tight end position, first of all, he needs to work on his blocking, and I think he needs to put on a few pounds because he looks a bit small for a tight end.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Ravens do a really good job coaching up their tight ends, and I don't think I think his functional strength is just fine. So I don't necessarily think he needs to put on more pounds. And I think the Ravens are going to do a great job coaching him up the same way they did with Mark Andrews, the same way they did with Josh Oliver. He'll be. I mean, you look too far ahead, but you start to wonder if it's another Darren Waller type. Well, not the same as Darren Waller, but he may end up going elsewhere as a starting star tight end because we already have Andrews, and it wouldn't be out of character for this team to extend Likely and think about running two tight end sets galore. But that's probably a little too ahead of ourselves. I want to hit my high miracle play of the week just because it should be fairly quick. There weren't really very many highlight plays. There were a couple lowlights. There was a lot of solid chunk plays, but very few highlights. So the one thing I want to take the opportunity to talk about is kind of the main highlight that was making the rounds on social media, which is Tyler Linderbaum pulling the blindside move on Devin White more than once, mind you. Absolutely ruined Devin White's night, probably his entire week. Todd Bowles was screaming at him on the sidelines after almost every drive. And that's because Tyler Linderbaum just put his hooks into him and put him away. I mean, he had to go home. It was time for him to go home.
His arms are a little short, though. Let's not forget that Linderbaum's arms are a little short. Let's not let that slide. I mean, if you're wondering why the Ravens traded Hollywood Brown, that is why. It's just he's been a rock. Other than the week 1 game, it was a bit of a tough debut against Quinnen Williams, but a lot of people have trouble with Quinnen Williams, so he's been, dare I say, the most consistent part of that offensive line this year.
I mean, I think Kevin Zeitler's probably got you there.
Zeitler's up there too, but
I still would be remiss not to shout out Patrick McCary because he's been consistent every time he's been asked to do the 80 different things he's been asked to do. So, but I mean, the thing is you doubt taking a center in the first round, and you have the best. Him and Creed Humphrey. I've said this a few times now. Him and Creed Humphrey are going to redefine the center position. They're going to make it an absolute fun thing to watch again in the NFL is watching centers. I'm still
upset the Ravens passed on Creed Humphrey.
Well, they had the plan. This was all in the works. This has been the
No,
plan
I
from the
love
start.
Eric DeCosta, but I will never get over that. I was sure he was coming to the Ravens. I was so bad when the Chiefs took him.
And it would have been a very Ravensy pick, but this ends up being just as good. It also forces Greg Roman to use more zone concepts and really get Linderbaum moving to the second level. The duo, the double teams they've been running, and the combo blocks they've been running have just been, I feel like, phenomenal overall. So really, really good work from him, especially in this game. The back to practice award. Before we actually hand this one out, I want to go back to something you said earlier about when we were talking about Isaiah Likely just kind of stepping into Mark Andrews' role, and then all of a sudden he's getting all these targets, he's getting open a lot. It does make you think, one, how much the Ravens playbook is structured, or passing playbook is structured around tight ends, how Mark Andrews is so often the first read on some of these plays, which we saw definitely in the first half against the Bucs with Lamar kind of forcing it to him. There were a couple throws that he ripped that I was totally fine with him trying to rip in there. I felt like he was, against the Browns, he was a little too conservative with trying to rip some of those throws in there. And I'm okay with him getting aggressive in that way, but it does kind of note to you that the reads for this playbook, where Lamar's looking first, might just too often be the tight end position, and it's letting other teams collapse on that. What do you think?
Well, we've always known that Greg Roman loves his tight ends, but I think Joe
Whoa! This
Flacco.
is a family podcast.
Oh my God. Moving on. Greg Roman. I'm not rephrasing that. That's your fault. Greg Roman loves his tight ends. Joe Flacco loved his tight ends. Wouldn't you love to see Joe Flacco in a Greg Roman offense? Oh, that would have been nice. Joe Flacco loved his tight ends. Dennis Pitta, Todd Heap, Ed Dixon. The list goes on. And honestly, I think Lamar Jackson loves his tight ends. I mean, he didn't really work out with Hurst, but Hurst had a nice couple plays as a Raven. Nick Boyle has had a nice couple of catches as a Raven. Mark Andrews has become an all-pro with Lamar Jackson as his quarterback. And when Mark Andrews is out, who does Lamar go to? Now, a lot of people will say that is the offense, but I think Lamar just likes throwing to that area of the field, because where is the tight end usually going to be when he comes out of a route?
Middle of the field and open. That's
open.
the other thing, is that, like, Andrews does get open a lot and wins contested balls, Likely gets open a lot and wins contested balls. And so I'm not like mad. It's just something I note as kind of okay, but when the Ravens are back to full strength on their offense, can we maybe do this less? Can we just try to spread the ball out a little more? Because I just think that is also important to getting Lamar chemistry with his receivers. And you saw in the second half, when he couldn't always go to Andrews, he was hitting James Prochet, he was hitting Demarcus Robinson, and it was working. It was in rhythm, it was on time. And never going to say Mark Andrews takes anything away from Lamar Jackson. That's obviously no one's crazy enough to say that.
Nope.
But it is, or that Jackson shouldn't consider Andrews his top target. But I just think Roman, James Urban, Lamar, Andrews, Bateman, the leaders of this offense that are leading the minds that are leading this offense, do need to do a little bit of a better job trying to just spread the ball out a little bit more and make sure other guys are considered threats. Because one, the more you go to Andrews, the less they consider other guys threats. It should make them open more. But if you're not hitting them anyway, you don't have the chemistry and you don't have the consistency. So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying that they have so much potential in this offense, but you have to wonder how much of that tight end focus is just limiting Lamar's ability to find better options elsewhere. It's not that Andrews isn't open or that he can't make all these plays. It's just that it feels like he's too often the second or third best person for Lamar to pass to on any given play sometimes, and Lamar's always thinking of him as the number one option.
People will will take what you just said and say that it's Greg Roman's or the scheme's fault. Like, a lot of this is on Lamar, because we have heralded Lamar's ability to make good reads. But Mark Andrews probably is that first read a little too often, but Lamar has been forcing a lot of balls this year to guys who maybe aren't open, and a lot of the time that is Mark Andrews.
Yeah, and again, it's never something I want to take away from their connection or their chemistry, but it is just something I've noticed that really came to the forefront in this game when you see Andrews go down. and all of a sudden Jackson's really targeting Likely, but he's also spreading the ball out more. And so it kind of makes me think, well, maybe it's not the playbook. It is a little bit more of a Lamar thing. And I think that brings me a little bit to the back to practice element of just his passing in the first half. What we've talked about with targeting Andrews and missing guys that are just more open. Not that Andrews isn't open, but guys that are more open. The other thing that you mentioned before we got on is the defensive backs and their picks. Now, would you like to say the classic line, or should I? That's why they don't play wide receiver.
Thank you.
But at the same time, please catch a football. Just one.
Now, I love Marlon Humphrey. I love Marcus Peters. I forget who dropped the third pick. I think it was Brandon Stevens. I love every single player in the Ravens defensive back room. But when Tom Brady throws a ball right to you, you gotta catch it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I went back and watched all of those. I think the third one would have been Clark. I can't remember.
No,
Peters
you're right. It was Chuck.
Peters,
it was Chuck.
Peters and Chuck have both. Actually, all three of them have dropped more. I would say more than their fair share of interceptions.
I think Patrick Queen has his share of dropped interceptions too.
Yeah, but he came up with one, right? He came up with one after that and
did.
made up for it. Here's the thing. With Marlowe's drop pick, he came off his route because he saw where the ball was going and was trying to go make a play on the wide receiver, and the ball happened to go right at him. You still got to catch that. Peter, I can't remember what happened with Peters and Clark, but I think to me it's just it's kind of the same thing with wide receivers and a lot of drops. The guys who lead the league in drops every year are usually the best wide receivers in the league because they're getting open. And they're so open that they're getting targeted, and there are a couple balls that they drop, but they're getting so many targets because they get open so often that they have a lot statistically. And so I think that's kind of the case with the Ravens too. They should have more interceptions than they do, but their defense is also exceptional at reacting to quarterbacks' eyes and getting in the right place to even have a chance at some of these interceptions that if Marlowe doesn't read that whole play perfectly, he's 10, 15 yards downfield from where the ball lands. And so part of me is like, this is exactly what the back to practice award is for. You did everything right, except for one thing, and that's catching the ball.
You didn't catch the ball.
And just go stand in front of the jugs machine. It worked for Patrick Queen. I think Harbaugh or McDonald should make like a system out of it. It's like you drop a pick, you're going to do blank.
Drop a pass, you run a mile.
Exactly.
You miss a blocking assignment, you run a mile. You fumble the football, and I will break my foot off in your John Brown hind parts. And then you will run a mile. Perfection.
I love you for that, and I can tell you, I don't know if my family is watching right now, but I'm definitely going to show that. That is our all-time favorite family movie, and we quote that specific line all the time. This
is why I get the big bucks over here in Oklahoma, Nikhil.
The massive bucks. So moving on to welcome to the flock. This one I think is also going to be fairly quick because Demarcus Robinson finally had the kind of sneaky good game we've been looking for out of him, the kind of thing he did in Kansas City a lot, which was just be open on these short little design routes that are designed not to get you open deep, not to cause any confusion or traffic elsewhere, but just to get you open with decent footwork. He didn't have to do anything special on most of those plays. He showed off some nice chemistry with Lamar on a couple of those broken plays that got extended. And so I kind of feel comfortable just kind of tossing this award in his direction, saying good job, bring it next week. But the thing I really want to talk to you about is this draft class. And the fact that it turns out that despite what I keep reading on the internet, that Eric DeCosta does know how to draft players.
What?
I think we can, the 2019, 2020, 2021 classes, we can maybe relitigate another time because I do think those need to be relitigated. But he got a lot of criticism for keeping all 11 of it, keeping and using we ended up with 11 picks in that draft, keeping and using all of them. Or maybe it was 10. Was it 10?
It was a lot.
Yeah. It was I can't remember. It was a lot. The fact that we can't remember. And he got a lot of flack for keeping and using them all. I think we gave up a third in the Hollywood trade that we got a first back for. So that kept it at 11. Yeah. But you look at the return. We already talked about Tyler Linderbaum. That's a hit. Travis Jones in the third round, I think, is already a hit. It was a steal at the time, already a hit. Fa'alele, for what he's done already this year in terms of stepping in for Stanley in those few games.
Fourth round rookie,
hit. I think very excited on Jalen Armour-Davis. I think the Ravens do view him as more a developmental guy. Pepe Williams, he needs some time to develop too. He is not a starting slot corner yet, but I do think he is.
To be fair, a mid to late round rookie like him playing this many snaps this soon is a testament to him.
Oh, he is extremely Tavon Young vibes, like absolutely. And Young wasn't great starting potential until second year, but you could see it in him, and I see the same thing in Pepe. I'm trying to even remember the rest of the draft pick. Stout hit, right? He had a huge game. He struggled a little bit to start. It's not easy with Sam Cook on the sidelines coaching you, but hit. Tyler Beatty.
I just want about Jordan Stout. He is 8th in the NFL in punt average right now. Just putting that out there.
Not bad for rookie. Where are the other two rookies? Camarda and I don't even know what's up with.
Ariza was the other one, and he is indisposed at the moment.
Yeah. And Camarda, I mean, Stout outdueled Camarda, and the whole thing with taking Stout where we did is obviously because we
Sam Cook liked him.
Well, because we knew that we knew that other teams were looking at punters. I mean, the Ravens are good at doing that, and Calvin Austin being out for the year is never something you want to see, but it does make you kind of breathe a little sigh of relief that things worked out the way they did, and we landed Isaiah Likely instead of instead of Calvin Austin at the end of all of it. So I think it's pretty clear that this draft class is, I think, initially it was like, oh, this is a foundational draft class. And, I think that's hard to say without knowing exactly what Ojabo is going to bring, without exactly knowing what Jalen Armour-Davis is going to bring, because I think those two players are really key players in terms of bringing this draft class to its ceiling. But already it's clear that this is a winning draft class. And so you got to shout out Eric DeCosta for that as well, and welcome them all to the flock.
I've been accused of carrying the front office's water many times on the Bird app. But when DeCosta did decide to go all in with all of his picks in last year's draft or this year's draft, he was criticized, and people do say that the Ravens are a bit stingy with their draft picks, but they've always been that team. Ozzie was that way. EDC is this way. And when I was talking to Mrs. DeCosta last week, she said to me, the Ravens are a team that build through the draft, and we're not that big, sexy free agent destination. We're not New York. We're not Los Angeles. They've always done a good job at drafting and developing players. Some people might not think that DeCosta is good at drafting. They're wrong, but the Ravens have always been a team that have relied on the draft. They're never going to do even close to what the Rams did to win their Super Bowl.
The Rams, or like the Eagles a few years back when they made a couple trades and they signed all those free agents, right? It's not their style. It's built into their compete every year mindset. And so, I think I also want to shout out your article with Lacey. I mentioned in my Out to Lunch this morning, but it was really phenomenal. I really enjoyed reading it, and I highly recommend anyone who's watching it go to Russell Street Report, check out Ben Dackiy's interview with Lacey DeCosta, and it's just a really good glimpse into the football side of the non-football side of our relationship with the Ravens and the Ravens fan base, I think is a cool way to describe it. So definitely check that out. But moving on to breakout of the week, again, kind of a quick one here, because you could talk Isaiah Likely. We already did. So now maybe we can focus a little bit on our first round pick named Kyle Hamilton, who had himself a fantastic game. He is not being used as Marcus Williams' replacement, which has been key to his development. He is being used as what he was drafted to be, which is a matchup weapon for the defense. Normally, the Ravens took the definition of weapon, I think, really interestingly this offseason. They drafted a center who's a weapon, and they drafted a weapon on defense. And that's two things that I just think are a little ahead of the curve in defense in the NFL, but they're trying to find guys that they're going to be able to use in all three phases of the game, or I guess in all three phases of defense, rushing the passer, defending the run, and covering receiving targets, and use Hamilton not as a traditional, I'm going to put you in center field or you're going to play strong safety down in the box. Hamilton's going to be a football player. He's going to be a defender playing everywhere. And so, you saw his pass defense was exceptional in this game. He had a couple pass breakups, good coverage on the tight ends, which is usually Brady's outlet when he's struggling. But I think the other thing to note is that he's actually showing up as a kind of a sneaky pass rusher too, with his long arms, and just kind of has a nose for how to use his physicality to get around people. So, I'm super happy with the way that the Ravens have developed him so far.
I mean, people, I spend way too much time on Twitter because all I see is how many people were upset that Geno Stone, another DeCosta draft pick, by the way, was starting at free safety in Marcus Williams' absence, which I know it's frustrating when the 14th overall pick, that was Kyle Hamilton was what's the word I'm looking for? Was the benefit of having such a bad year last year. The Ravens don't get him in a normal season. If the Ravens aren't as bad as they were last year, Kyle Hamilton is playing somewhere else.
Yeah. I mean, he fell because teams didn't want to draft a safety that early and didn't know what to do with him. I still think the Ravens were looking to get Jordan Davis or Chris Olave, maybe Garrett Wilson, and got sniped by the Eagles and the Saints.
God, I would have loved Jordan Davis in Baltimore.
Yeah, absolutely. But having Hamilton fall out of consensus top 5, consensus top 10, all the way to 14 is like you said, a good consolation prize for everything that happened last year, and not throwing him into that role. And I think we'll talk about Geno Stone a little bit later, but not throwing him into Marcus Williams' role right away is really letting him unlock his skill set. He's young. I think Kyle Hamilton is 21 still.
22? Well, for Kyle Hamilton, like some people saying, it's not good for his development if you're not putting him at free safety. But with a guy as athletic as he is, you could line him up at linebacker and he would be fine, and just drop him into coverage.
And that's what the Ravens are doing, right? They signed Marcus Williams for 5 years, which is the same amount of time that they have Kyle Hamilton for. Now, obviously, they're not thinking past that first contract for Hamilton yet. And if you think about pairing Hamilton and Williams, well, yeah, you're comfortable with Hamilton defending deep, and he can absolutely do that. But then you're actually able to deploy him as a weapon. You're able to line him up off the edge of the line of scrimmage over top tight ends, and he'll be a legitimate threat to blitz. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if the Ravens got him working with Ryan Osborne, who is Michigan State's former defensive assistant, who really helped unlock Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo last year. He's now coaching in Baltimore with Mike McDonald, and it wouldn't shock me if they tried to get Kyle Hamilton to unlock more of his blitzing ability, because that just gives you a guy who's 6'4", 220 with the wingspan of a guy who's like 6'9", rushing. I mean, it doesn't sound like a bad idea. And so it's just so smart of them to say, look, we could just throw our safety into Marcus Williams' role and let him go, but instead we're going to stick with the plan. We're going to trust our plan for developing, again, a guy who is 21 years old and is, relatively speaking to all of his peers, very young and inexperienced in not just NFL football, but higher level football. I mean, he played 2 years at Notre Dame, 3 with COVID. I'm checking down.
Since we are talking about breakouts, how about Geno Stone? Like, he's playing good.
Yeah, I mean, Stone, I'll skip to it now. I'm looking up this stat about Hamilton. Stone is the unsung hero of this team right now. He is playing incredible defense. He is doing an amazing job stepping in for who was basically Marcus Williams, basically the best free safety in the NFL to start the year. He has stepped in, and while there are some of those deep plays that are going, and he's not quite as good on the deep balls as Marcus Williams is. You saw him make a couple highlight plays. He stopped a first down against the Bucs early in the game, and you just can't argue with what he brings to the defense as a guy who, again, Geno Stone, went to Iowa, 7th round pick for the Ravens in 2020, and that's after 2019. So that's the 219th overall pick in the 2020 draft. Was drafted amid COVID, his rookie year was COVID, had to deal with all that, went to Houston for a little while, but the Ravens wanted him back last year, and for good reason, because they saw what they had in him, and really it's lucky that the Texans didn't offer him a qualifying offer before last season, didn't extend him an offer before last season, because we wouldn't have him back now. And he's kind of proving I honestly think he's going to be a hard guy to hold on to. I think there's going to be a team that's going to come calling with more interest than they had for Deshaun Elliott, because Elliott really projected as more of a downhill safety, where Stone's proving that he can be, your third safety as a deep cover guy.
Well, I mean, ideally after the season, we won't need a Geno Stone on the roster. He's been great, but I hope we don't see this much of him next year.
I mean, if we let go of Chuck Clark and Geno Stone's our third safety, and Hamilton starts where Clark is, and Geno Stone's our third safety, I'm pretty satisfied with that. I certainly think there could be potential better third options out there, but for the price that we'd probably get with Stone versus what we'd have to do with Clark or anyone else, I still think
DeCosta can't draft. Don't forget, DeCosta can't draft.
DeCosta was a 6th-round pick, but anyway, Kyle Hamilton, he's only played 2 seasons. He was a freshman and a sophomore, and he was a sophomore in 2020 for Notre Dame, which was a protracted season. And there's development to be done, and the Ravens are clearly taking the slow path. I love seeing Marlon Humphrey kind of emerge as his unofficial mentor buddy on the team.
Marlon making fun of Hamilton on Instagram is my new favorite subplot the Ravens have. And the field, it's hilarious.
Yeah, and it's great. Like it's so good for Hamilton, and he feels part of the club. He's 20. Like, I can't get over this enough. He's 21 years old. He was able to start legally drinking alcohol a month, 6 weeks before he was drafted? That's nuts for a guy that young to be drafted as the 14th overall pick. And the Ravens are doing a smart job developing him. I think we can move on to head scratcher of the week, which honestly, I keep going back and forth on this whole rope-a-dope first half strategy, because it makes sense for what you're going up against. But then you look at what the Ravens do on offense best, and you're just like, why would you go so far away from that with 30 passes in the first half? And, some of it's on Lamar, some of it's on, why aren't you running the ball?
It's really weird, because I am a big proponent of your quarterback should not be throwing more than 20 times in a half, more than 40 times in a game. Like, I'm a big supporter of that. I don't think if you're running a good offense, or unless you're playing from behind, you really shouldn't be throwing the ball that much. And when you're the Ravens and you're Greg Roman and you're this run game guru, why aren't you running the ball? And at the time before he got hurt, mind you, before he got hurt, why aren't you feeding Gus Edwards? I get that he was, to be fair, he was coming off an injury, and it was Thursday.
Like, your answer's right there. It was
the run game, Greg. It's not that hard.
Yeah, I think that. And look, they acknowledged it after the game, and I don't hate the kernel of the idea behind it. It's just they took it too far. Look, they came back and they ran the ball down the Bucs' throats all second half. So I don't question it so much. I guess we'd be questioning it more if it didn't kind of work. Right? I mean, you didn't get the shots that you wanted in the first half. They wanted to get more shots in the first half, and they just didn't get any. And so I think, one, it goes back to Lamar taking checkdowns and underneath passes more than he does. And 2, understanding quickly that the Bucs know they have a weak secondary. They're playing a lot of deep coverage, a lot of off coverage, and you need to adjust to that sooner. Shockingly, I know we're still shocked by the fact that Greg Roman is not that great at adjusting right away. He's okay at halftime. He's okay. The problem with Roman to me is he needs something to be going really obviously wrong in the first half to make any adjustments.
And to be fair, on Thursday he did.
And he did, right? He did. But I think, again, part of that was because of the plan. And, the short week, you have to kind of come up with a different way to try and win the game, because it's totally different than playing with the full week. So I get it to a certain extent. It was weird in real time. It made some sense right after the game, but as I think about it more and more, it makes less and less sense.
It's just so frustrating. For my head scratcher of the week, it baffles me how this team, and this has gone back to the Joe Flacco and the Ray Lewis, maybe not so much when Ray Lewis was here, but definitely in the tail end of the Flacco years, this team cannot come out well in primetime games. They didn't come out well on Thursday. They didn't come out well against the Chiefs last year. They didn't come out well against the Colts last year. It is a running theme with this team. And I don't like pointing the finger at Harbaugh. I love John Harbaugh, but whatever he's doing before primetime games isn't working.
It is so strange because they do find like it's there's no reason for it. Like there isn't an opponent related reason. There aren't really consistent injury related reasons across the games. They just come out flat in prime time a lot, whether they're home or away, and it's something to look out for next week against New Orleans.
Or in the playoffs.
Yeah, and it's the
They
kind
came
of
out
thing.
dead against Tennessee in the playoffs 2 years ago too. So there's that.
Yeah, well, it's the kind of thing where you don't you hit that. I think sometimes they hit a wall right away. A defense comes out very prepared, and they hit a wall right away, and it's hard for the offense to reset from that mentality. I think the defense mostly does fine coming out. I think defense is more about adjusting as the game goes on. But I agree. Again, I don't really know what to do about it, who to point the finger at, because again, it's like a different issue every game. It's a different problem that happens every game. And so because it's different, you can't pinpoint it to, one coach or one player. You can really only pinpoint it to one. If you're going to pinpoint it to one person, it's got to be Harbaugh. But again, I don't know what Harbaugh is like supposed to do other than what he already does before it's primetime games. It's just one of those things where
he should just play
players
clips of Remember the Titans in the locker room before the game. Clearly, that's what he needs to do.
It might work, or like get like a mashup of like Any Given Sunday, and what the Orioles play at Camden Yards right before they need like a late rally to win. They have that like Any Given Sunday, Rocky, throw some Remember the Titans, get all the sports movie clips going in the locker room. But it just, I don't know. Maybe they're too tight. I don't know.
It's just frustrating because I can't put it on either of any of the coordinators, because it's been an issue for so long. It was an issue when Dean Pease was here. It was an issue when Marty was here. It's just been an issue for so long. I don't like saying that something is Harbaugh's fault, but he's the only constant here.
And fault is one thing or another, but responsibility to fix is certainly, to me, on Harbaugh to at least get to the bottom of it and figure out why.
It's just been an issue for so long. It's frustrating.
I kind of think they come out hot against New Orleans, just personally. Big acquisition, I feel like fires them up a little bit. Second primetime game in a row. They've had a lot of time off. They're going into a bye, and so they know they can really push for it. So I don't know. Maybe that's just me feeling lucky about
Patrick Queen, didn't he win a national championship in that building?
Yes, he did.
So maybe that'll spark him up a little bit.
Yeah. So last category, comeback player of the week. Really, I just want to take this moment to talk about, Ronnie Stanley's done well, had another solid game. Not too much to say about that other than I think our boy Ronnie Stanley is back, not just kind of back. Two guys I want to mention. Houston I mentioned as a potential Raven of the game earlier, even though we did give it to Likely. Look, 2 sacks and 16 snaps. He's like 6th in the NFL in snacks. See, I haven't had dinner yet. That's why. He's 6th in the NFL in sacks on just 3 games worth of snaps, 4 games worth of snaps, and you just watch him play and you're like, how is anyone supposed to block this man? But also, how is this man 34, 35, whatever years old he is? The other guy I want to mention, I've been knocking him the last few weeks, and I'm gonna have to, really give him his props. Is Morgan Moses. Didn't allow a single pressure. Seemed to be really dialed in on everything, particularly run blocking. I felt like he was doing a really good job on the right side, just, locking down the run blocking. I don't know how else to really praise him for it, but had a couple rough games, had the injury, had a lot of people, including me, calling for McCary or Falele to take over either after the mini bye or after the full bye. If he keeps playing this well, I'm not sure that happens. The Ravens, did invest in him and may want to hold the course, but good for him to come back and have a good game despite dealing with that injury.
I think the health of Justin Houston and Jason Pierre-Paul could very well be a big player in just how this season ends for the Baltimore Ravens, because I always love the JPP acquisition because I love having him around Owe. I love having him around Ojabo in the facility every day. And I think Justin Houston is a guy, he needs that just one last good playoff run in him before he decides to hang it up. And with what he's done for the Ravens since he could have left if he wanted to. But for everything he's done everything the Ravens have asked him to do. Keep that man healthy. Whatever it takes, keep him healthy for the playoffs, because mark my words, in January, him and JPP are going to wreck a game for an opposing offense.
I think so. And I think Houston's making his case. I'm going to keep saying this until he's either in or he's no longer eligible. But I think Houston's making a case for a Hall of Fame player. Not that many guys have 100 career sacks. Not that many guys have hit. He's probably going to hit. I don't know how many he'll hit with Ravens, but he's got 20 sacks for the Colts. He's got a lot of sacks for the Colts, a lot of sacks for the Chiefs.
Was he with the Chiefs when they won the Super Bowl, or was he in Indy by that point?
Good question. Let me look that up. But I think the thing is just the impact he's had on edge rushing in general, making it into an art. I think he's been a part of that in the last 10 years as anyone. And you can tell he's already starting to pass some of that on. Ojabo, Owe, Bowser all get to kind of even Malik Harrison to a certain extent, even Hamilton to an even certain extent, are going to get to be the beneficiaries of everything he knows on how to use his arms and his legs and all that stuff to get past opposing blockers.
Owe he's making a lot of improvements. He's not just running at tackles anymore. He's making moves, and he's so close.
He's making secondary moves too.
He's so close, Nikhil. He's so close.
Yeah, and look, he wasn't a top 10 pick. He wasn't a top 15 pick. He wasn't a top 20 pick. It does take guys, he was borderline. He was a borderline second rounder. He probably would have gone somewhere I'm not sure how high other teams were on him. He might have gone somewhere in the middle of the second round if he doesn't get drafted by the Ravens. And
that 5th-year option is going to come in handy. Mark my words.
It is. And I think that, this team knows what they got in him. They don't draft for instant impact. They don't draft for who's the best player right now. They draft for who's going to become the best player. And always, I'm not saying he is that right away, but I think he has a chance to become one of the better edge defenders in the league, given his physical profile. But it is true he's got to pick. He's got to find a way to convert, and people are going to keep saying that until he does. Looking ahead, now we mentioned the Saints earlier. I think the main things I'm thinking about for the Saints right now, hold out Gus. I don't think it makes any sense to play him against the Saints. I think Bowser will play. I don't think Ojabo does. Bowser's in. Bowser, I think, is probably fully ready to play recovery-wise. Ojabo, you got to remember, his injury was still, it was what?
Wasn't it both Achilles? Weren't they both Achilles?
Yeah, they were both Achilles, but Bowser was in early January, whereas I think
Bowser's was a month earlier. You're right.
No, Ojabo's was in March or April. It was 2 or 3 months earlier.
I think it was in March.
Yeah, it was his whenever his pro day was. And so you got to remember that he is still 7 months removed from an Achilles injury and making the transition to the NFL. So I think they should hold him out until after the bye. Let him take on a small role and grow. I trust they have a plan. I'm certain they've had a plan for it since they drafted him, exactly how they're going to work in back.
Harbaugh has said that Bowser and Ojabo will be activated this week. So I would like. I don't know if
will play. Ojabo will not. I would bank.
I don't know. I think Bowser for sure is going to play. I think Ojabo dresses on Monday. He gets maybe a couple of snaps. Maybe
I don't think he plays.
Maybe
I think there's a 0% chance he plays.
Do you think he dresses?
No, he's going to be inactive. He shouldn't be active. They shouldn't put him on the field. It's his first NFL action ever. He's only played football for 5 or 6 years. I don't feel bad about saying it. He's not ready. I don't think he's ready to play.
Okay, that's fair.
I don't know. I think it's tough when you don't get training camp. You don't get training camp. You don't get OTAs. You don't get any of that to transition.
Yeah,
you've got to. He can only really play one role for the time being, which is designated pass rusher. I think he'll be quite good at it, but that also limits his effectiveness because the other team knows he's not going to be dropping off. If he's lined up to blitz, he's going to blitz. Like every play, he's going to be coming at the line. And, again, I don't fault the pick. I don't dislike the pick because of it. But I think the Ravens have been intentional about bringing him back and have a plan in place that's going to try and adjust for the fact that he's had no time to adjust, and he's still a fairly young player. And now that they actually have some semblance of edge depth, Malik Harrison will play less inside linebacker and is more available to play edge now, for example. And so that now that they have that you just don't feel the need to rush along Ojabo before he's ready, and you just try and squeeze whatever you can out of him for this year. Bateman's going to be out at least through obviously, which sucks. It should Deshaun Jackson hopefully then is active, but it still just raises questions about how they're going to move the ball through the air. They're not going to be able to come out with the same rope-a-dope strategy. We're hoping Mark Andrews is okay, but part of me says he can dress, but part of me says like limit him. Maybe just don't have him play at all. Honestly, I know it's tough. I know it's tough to think about going into a game without Bateman or Andrews, but one, we won the game without Bateman. We won the game after they were both out, and two, it is a pretty bad Saints team. Like you never want to underestimate an opponent. Alvin Kamara is certainly good, but I'm not trying. Like this is the kind of game to me where you're like, look, I can't re-injure Edwards. I can't get Andrews hurt even more. I can't let Ojabo go in there and get thrown around in his first NFL action and not be ready. I gotta somewhat take my chances here, knowing that I'm 2-0 in the division. I have the current lead in the AFC North, and one of the second place teams is going to lose tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I never loved betting against the Saints in the Superdome. But if you are going to pick a game to maybe not have all your weapons at your disposal, they chose for it not to be the Bucs game. They went at it with Andrews and Bateman, and we saw how that turned out. So if you're going to lose a game, it's better this one than before a bye than a divisional game down the road.
Yeah, and I also think not like being prepared. They won't tell us anything about Andrew's status until they announce the inactives.
People need to stop putting so much stock into what Harbaugh says about injuries. Like, he doesn't like talking about injuries. Like, who cares? We're not going to learn anything until game day.
Yeah, he's incredibly coy, and that's fine. He's allowed to be. He should be. He doesn't. Why give away information? I know it's frustrating as fans, but it lets other teams figure things out. But Andrews not being out, I think they have to make that decision. Try to make that decision earlier rather than later, so that during their practices this week, they're really focusing on what their offense is how their offense is going to function without Mark Andrews. That's actually a very big question that was kind of made up for by them just gashing Tampa Bay on the ground. But if New Orleans finds a way to force you to pass, I don't know what you're going to do. Clearly, likely, and DeMarcus Robinson, Duvernay, and even Prochet can play. They can catch balls. You can make it work, but you have to be more ready for that going into New Orleans game than you were going in against Tampa Bay. And I think that to me, it just feels like conditions are right to hold a couple guys out. The last thing you want is any more significant injury to these guys, especially your Mark Andrews, your Rashad Bateman, your Gus Edwards, where, Andrews hasn't struggled with injuries. Bateman and Edwards clearly have. And so to me, it's kind of it's a get by game. And because it's a winnable game, I think you're not dooming your chances of winning the game by sitting a couple guys. I think you're still pretty confident about being able to get that win because the Saints are just not good. And I think you're just confident, especially in your defense's ability to just make this a winnable game.
So here's the thing. We can sit here and we can say that, oh, this is a get-by game. The Ravens can set a couple of guys. The players want to play. Mark Andrews wants to play.
Oh, yeah.
Like Gus Edwards wants to play. If they want to play, then they're going to prepare like they're going to play. So at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what we think.
No. And I think that, I think that Andrews and Edwards should try to prepare as if they're going to play. But, and I credit the Ravens have done this all year. They did this with Dobbins, and he ended up, whether it's on the Ravens or Dobbins, I don't want to get into because I don't think it's necessarily that fair to blame.
I blame the turf.
Blame the turf. But they've been really, really intentional with not letting guys come back too quickly from injuries. And I'd be shocked if that stopped here. The thing I really want to spend the last, 5-ish, 10 minutes we have on this podcast is the kind of secondary implications of this Roquan Smith trade. Roquan Smith is headed to Baltimore as it screams on the ticker below us. And this is great for the defense, as we talked about at the top of the show. But there are a lot of questions that come along with this. The Ravens are only taking up about, I think, 575,000 of his cap hit. So the Bears are eating the rest of that. That's how they got a second and a fifth and AJ Klein out of the deal. AJ Klein, thank you for coming to Baltimore, committing some annoying penalties, not being very helpful on special teams, and getting some clutch stops against the Bucs in the red zone. Hell of a Ravens career, AJ Klein. Like, look forward to the Ring of Honor ceremony in several years. I thought it was so funny he got tossed into that trade. But
I want to know what the Bears saw in AJ Klein's tape that were like
the Bucs in the red zone a couple times and said, "Hey, we've seen Roquan Smith do that. Maybe he part of it is the Ravens need to get him off the roster anyway, and so they're probably like, "Hey, do you want AJ Klein?"
No, I know, but of all the linebackers on the roster, why do you pick AJ Klein?
Well, because you're not gonna. They're not gonna give up Harrison, Bynes, Queen. They're not going to give up any of the edge guys.
Yeah, I guess they're not going to get rid of Ross either.
I think
McDonald liked him too much.
It was really hey, we're going to cut AJ Klein, but we can throw him in the deal if you want him. I guarantee you that was it.
Yeah.
Like it's nothing more. It's not like it got the deal done. Maybe they gave up AJ Klein and a fifth instead of a second and a fourth, but still, if I were the Bears, I would still take the fourth rounder over AJ Klein. So I don't see, or the fourth upgrade over a fifth over AJ Klein. So I don't see how
AJ Klein has taken some strays here, and I feel bad now.
But it's fine. No, he thanks him for his contributions against the Bucs. Look, he's an NFL player who's he does. I guarantee you, he does not get. But he gets it. They all get it. I want to say most of them, especially the older ones, they get it. They get they get the criticism. They get it's part of the public life they chose, and I respect that for most of these guys. A lot of these guys. But like I was saying, a lot of secondary implications here. So let's take them in order. I'd say the first one is the Ravens have the flexibility to complete another trade if they're feeling really spicy. I don't know how spicy Eric DeCosta happens to be feeling at this particular moment, but after acquiring Roquan Smith for his minimal cap amount, they still have, I think, a little over 2.5 to play with. I'm looking at over the cap right now. They can open up, I think, around another 4 with a couple of restructures. I think they could probably open up about 6 million, 7 million maybe of cap room with restructures, which is enough for another potential move, which I think would pretty much have to be wide receiver. Of course, they could go out and get us a cornerback, and I wouldn't complain about that. That was one of the things I thought they were going to do just because it's their MO. But if they could make one more move, knowing that you have a pretty limited budget for what you could do this year, you got anyone particular in mind?
It's not going to happen, but in keeping the budget and
the fact that they already gave up a second and a fifth and don't want to get rid of their entire draft next year.
It's them winning in London kind of puts a monkey wrench into any chance of this happening, but I would love to see Jerry Jeudy in a Ravens uniform. Like that, he fills that Hollywood role to a T, but he's just taller.
Yeah. I mean,
it's not going to happen though. I'd love it, but it's not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think Jeudy, I think you could toss a first stat for next year. But I think that would be a lot to pay for a guy who's proven next to nothing in the NFL so far. He just really hasn't proven himself.
Percentage.
And so it would be kind of a buy low type deal. I mean, he didn't have a great game in London either. And so I think the Broncos might still be motivated to move him, but it might have to be like a 2024 first or something like that, because the Ravens don't want to give up their entire class. They don't want to give up their first and second. If it takes a first and a third or something like that, they don't want to give up all of those extra picks just to get Jeudy. A future first might be a fair compromise because that's not as valuable to the Broncos as this year's first. But I'm not sure they could get a first for Jeudy as is. I still think they could go more of a bargain type deal, maybe like a Sean Murphy Bunting on an expiring contract. But I think I'd be a little surprised if they made another deal because they gave up 2 picks, they gave up a second rounder, and we just know how much they love those picks. And it's hard to blame them for it. We know how important draft picks are. And I I would just be surprised if we made another move here. I wouldn't hate it. And I think this move being done on Monday suggests that they're still kind of trying to find that bargain deal. But I think it's just that. I don't think they're giving up more than a third or a fourth for a deal now. I think the first is kind of out of range because they gave up the second. Unless it's like DJ Moore for just a first and no third, for example, which I think would probably be the going rate for him at least.
I think the chances of getting DJ Moore, a Judy, or whoever the third guy was, I think Elijah Moore. I don't think that that's going to happen. The Panthers have shown that they don't want to trade DJ Moore unless they get a massive offer. The Broncos apparently have no interest in trading Judy, so that's probably not going to happen. And the Jets don't want to trade Elijah Moore. So that kind of limits what you can get for, like, if fans are waiting for the Ravens to ship off multiple first-round picks for DJ Moore, that's just not going to happen. That's not
or
just
ship off a third for Elijah Moore is not going to happen either.
Or a third for Elijah Moore. I wouldn't hate it if they did that.
I'd be fine with that, but I just don't see them actually doing it now.
They're not going to do it because that's just not how they operate. And people will say, oh, they don't care about Lamar. The Ravens have done a lot for Lamar Jackson, and I'm very tired of people pretending that Lamar Jackson has been hard done by the Ravens. So if the Ravens do get a wide receiver, I think it will be someone like Denzel Mims.
I could see that, and I could see him coming in and just being another dude and like a big receiver, something we've talked about a lot for this team. Gives them more options to match up. So yeah, I agree. I think it'll be a Mims kind of trying to find the bargain basement move for a team that's just desperate to get rid of a guy for, like, the conditional sixth or, the conditional seventh or whatever. I'm hoping they find a deal like that, but those deals are getting harder and harder to find because DeCosta is so good at trading that teams want to trade. They feel like he's fleecing them, and they're asking for more in deals because he's just getting this rep now. So well, I don't know. We'll see. We've got less than 24 hours left. We've got 21 hours left till the deadline hits tomorrow, and maybe the Ravens are active. I think if another pickup happens, it's certainly wide receiver or corner, and it's nothing major. It's a guy. It's a Sean Murphy Bunting for a fourth kind of deal, something like that. That is certainly helpful, but isn't the blockbuster splash move because we already got that one today. And I also think having any expectations for them to make another deal is crazy because what is up with your expectations for this team and this front office then if they trade for a top 10 inside linebacker and give up a second round pick to do so? If that's not enough for you, go be a Rams fan because you won't be happy here.
And we're seeing that the F them picks model that the Rams decided to go with. If they run into anyone other than the 49ers in the NFC Championship game, they do not have a ring right now. I'm just putting that out there. I know that's easy for me to say, but they do not win at Lambeau with that team that they had. If the Packers didn't blow it against the Niners, the Packers win that game 10 times out of 10. So
I might disagree with you on that, but
I believed in the Packers that year.
I do think that you're seeing the results of going all in. You're not able to get Von Miller back. You're able to keep your Cup and your Donald, but you're not getting anything from your rookie class this year because you don't have much of a rookie class this year. And when injury, it's basically banking on being a very healthy team too, and not having much year-to-year regression, which, as you can see, is happening big time with Stafford. And yeah, the Ravens just don't like going that route. And again, if you're expecting it, your expectations are too high and you're setting yourself up to get disappointed. The other thing I want to address long-term with this Roquan deal is the long-term with Roquan. I mean, the Ravens have, I believe, about $40 million in effective cap space next year. There are plenty of moves they can make that I think would get that number up to 60 or 65. That's pre-Lamar tag, pre-anything else.
And the cap might be going up.
Well, that's the thing is a tag I think would be about 40, fully guaranteed. So that's going to drop you 20 to 25 million. The first year of a 18 to 20 million average annual value deal for Roquan is probably the first year cap hit's probably not going to be more than 4, 6, 8. It's definitely not going to be more than 10. My guess is they structure it in a way so that the first year is like 6 or 8. So they're not completely kicking the can down the road. but that still gives you enough room to play with, maybe a Peters extension or something like that. Seeing how much money the Ravens brought over, if they brought over a ton of Roquan's money, for example, you knew a Peters or Lamar extension had to be happening, which it's not. I think the Ravens ultimately are going to stay pat until February, where all the dust settles after the season. Look at what the free agent market actually looks like, because it's started to dry up already. Have an idea of what their draft class is going to look like, or at least their picks, and then figure out, okay, if we have to tag Lamar, that's priority number one. That's $40 million gone. Okay, then we have this much left to devote to these players, and so it kind of cascades down from there. I thought we'd get some of those answers. We had a chance of getting some of those answers today. Clearly, we didn't. Do you want to sign Roquan long term? Certainly not at the expense of, I would assume, extending Lamar. But the cost that he wants, the $20 million a year cost, is, oof. I can't see the Ravens paying that.
This has the potential to be another CJ Mosley situation in terms of paying an inside linebacker. If the Ravens do win, like if he is an immediate upgrade over Patrick Queen, over Malik Harrison, and he just brings the inside linebacker play to a whole new level, he is the kind of player the Ravens would love to have in their building for several years. That $20 million price tag isn't going to happen in Baltimore, and it's not going to happen anywhere else, at least not if you want to contend for championships. But I think that they could absolutely get a deal done if the rest of this season goes well. There is a chance that he doesn't play well in Baltimore and this ends up being a bad acquisition, which I don't think will happen, but it could happen. But extending Lamar is first. And in terms of Lamar on the tag, I give absolutely no chance happening that Lamar plays next season under the franchise tag. There's no way that, I think he'd hold out before he played on the franchise tag.
Yeah, to me, it's so singularly hard to predict what happens there, that at least with the tagging him, you have him for that certain amount. And unfortunately, what it does is, if you come to agreement if you tag him, the tag deadline's a lot earlier. And so I think the tag happens either way, and then they figure out the extension after, and then maybe they figure out the Roquan Smith, the Peters extension before free agency starts. But they're going to have not just all of their ducks in a row, but all of their rows of ducks in a row, to have all of their plans, their contingency plans ready for the several different ways that all of this could play out. I mean, it's a big bet on their front office to kind of figure out all this cap nonsense and get through it, basically. I don't know. I don't know. I'm definitely in favor of extending Roquan. I just don't know if I'd pay him $20 million, average $20 million a year on that contract. I think the Ravens could also be thinking, we'll get him this year. We know we don't have the money to make any huge free agent acquisitions next year. It's going to be mainly Lamar. And so we let Roquan walk in free agency. We make sure we get the comp pick from him without having a really big signing otherwise. And we kind of recoup some of that draft capital we gave up for him. That just doesn't seem like what this team does, though. And it just seems contrary to what this team typically does with getting, extending their best players, extending really good players, especially a position like linebacker, where they think they might be able to get ahead of the market a little bit. I don't know how they think that with Roquan Smith asking what he wants, but I don't know, man. The more I think about it, I'm very excited for this season, and I just have so many questions about what the long-term plan is after this year.
There is one kind of curveball here that is an interesting kind of piece in this whole Roquan Smith situation. Patrick Queen. If Roquan Smith gets a contract, I don't know what that means for Patrick Queen. Like, the cap is going up, and Roquan Smith is a 2-time All-Pro. Patrick Queen is a 0-time All-Pro. Mm-hmm. So unless Patrick Queen, it's possible he takes a jump when Roquan Smith is playing next to him and he's learned the defense. But the Ravens are going to have a question. If they do decide to keep Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen plays out year 3. He plays out year 4. He gets the 5th-year option for year 5. That's 3 years down the line. So I don't think it's as big of a deal as some people saying, like, oh, Patrick Queen, writing is on the wall now. Like, there's still a chance that Patrick Queen could take a massive leap and has an all-pro year of his own.
Yeah, and I think it's I think part of it is the being the Ravens are a lot more uncomfortable in the unknown and the uncertainty than fans are. They seem to just they trust themselves to operate. And look, this season's a good example. Coming into the year with the edge rushing the way it was, not sure about it. They stayed the course. They coached up Malik Harrison. They made the JPP move when they felt like they needed to. So they're very comfortable, weirdly so, in this unknown space, in this uncertain space. And it's you just in EDC we trust. I mean, that's pretty much all you can say about it, right? With Queen, there's still a lot to be seen out of him. The Ravens could try and trade him and get draft value back for him. The Ravens could, be okay with him walking and not pick up his 5th-year option and let him walk and get a comp hit back. I mean, I think the thing is they do a good job, and I think a better job than they did last year, and of keeping lanes open to them in the future. Not getting Lamar locked down before last year or the year is really closed off a lot of their paths for this year and even for next year. And I think one of the things they're trying to prioritize is having more cap flexibility and having more flexibility in general to construct your team, knowing that, okay, I don't have to pick up, if I extend Roquan Smith, now I don't have to pick up Patrick Queen's 5th-year option. I still may want to, but I don't feel like I have to make sure I have a starting linebacker on my team later. But on the same side, they may not feel like they have to extend Roquan Smith because they have Patrick Queen for the next year, potentially 2, or is it 2, potentially 3 years? I forget. This is his 3rd year. So we'd have to decide on his 5th year before next season. So we have him for 1 plus potentially 1 more season on his 5th year. And the Ravens could be thinking, well, I don't need to extend Roquan because I have Queen. So I don't know. I'm sure there are a lot of answers that they're already working on. But it is a move that does end up begging a lot of questions for their long.
I don't think DeCosta gives up a 2nd-round pick. We know how much he loves those early round picks. I don't think he gives up that 2nd-round pick unless he knew that there was some rapport on a deal. I think we are going to be getting the Roquan Smith signs extension with Ravens tweet very soon. That's how I feel.
Yeah, it is so tough because the amount he wants at a non-valued position, it just doesn't feel super Ravensy to give an off-ball linebacker $20 million a year when you consider everything else that they need to figure out on their roster. But, Matabike extension, Duvernay extension. So those the 2019 and 2020 guys are coming up. And so some of them you're going to want to keep. And, the next few years, Mark Andrews cap hit, Tyus Bowser's cap hit, some of them are going to start to go up too. And so it's like I said, more questions than answers in terms of what the plan is. And I think, like I said earlier, the plan is to have multiple plans, to be able to go in different directions with how the rest of the season goes and how Lamar is coming into negotiations in February. So I don't want to be on here for the pod too long. I think we did a pretty good job breaking down what turned out to be a pretty busy week for the Ravens between Monday's game, Thursday's game, and now today's trade. Got a week before their next game, and man, I'm excited. I think they're in a great spot for the rest of the year.
One more thing I did want to say. We have officially passed the threshold of Greg Roman getting fired in the middle of the season. So I hope you enjoyed it, everyone, but we will have Greg Roman as offensive coordinator for the rest of the season.
I think it's totally possible they lay a massive egg versus the Saints and they fire him in the bye. I just don't think they do it before a bye is all.
I feel like if they do what you're proposing that they do and use it as a get-by game, they're not going to fire him if they lose that.
No.
Lamar would have to play really, really terribly for Roman to get fired.
Right, and it's almost like, Lamar would have to play really, really terribly for Roman to get fired. How much can you put that on Roman? Because if Lamar plays really well, then you're not really going to have issues with the offense, most likely.
I think he saved his job in Tampa. I said that right when it happened, and I believe it. I think he saved his job in Tampa.
Yeah, I think I tweeted he's calling plays like his job's on the line, and they're playing for him like his job's on the line. And again, I think the other thing is that there isn't an obvious upgrade available. T. Martin would be fine, but the only reason you fire Roman now is to really make a statement and shake things up about what the offense is. And it just doesn't seem like they're going to do that after running the ball to victory once again. So I think we can cut that off here for the pod. Ben, thanks so much for joining me. It was really a blast. This trade was really just a electric way to kick off this pod and really change the focus of it. And I think really changes the tenor of the Ravens defense for the rest of the season. So, Mr. Ben, the fashionista over there, thanks so much for joining me.
See you next time, Nikhil.
Thanks so much to everyone who tuned in. Have a good week.